Good evening and welcome to Season 3, Episode 17 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Andrew de Blok, coming to you live from Johannesburg, South Africa. We want to remind you all before we start that all of our shows are recorded and available on our YouTube channel, so if you do miss out because the lights go dark, you can always catch up later. And while you're there, please remember to click the subscribe button and help us to grow the support for our channel. Tonight's webinar is the next in our agritourism series on birding in and around South Africa's major cities, and it's being delivered by one of the very popular KZNer birders. But before we get to that, just a reminder to communicate with us using the chat and Q&A feeds in Zoom, or if you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can use the comments feed there. And again, a reminder that we are on all major social media channels, and you can use the hashtag Conservation Conversations to let us know what you think of the show. Thank you, as always, for the generous contributions towards our webinars, which help to keep these shows free for everyone to learn and enjoy. Visit the Cricket page or EFT BirdLife South Africa directly and use the reference webinars and your name if you do EFT. Now, our online shop for the birds has an exciting line of branded clothing which has been launched. You can get your soft shell jackets and your fleeces as pictured here, or you can even get hats and beanies in a whole range of colors and only at shop.birdlife.org.za. These are great quality items, especially for the winter cold we're experiencing at the moment, and they come with an embossed BirdLife South Africa logo so that you can proudly show your support for our work. And now a new addition. BirdLife South Africa is committed to ensuring an inclusive, supportive and welcoming birding community. And with this in mind, we've launched a limited edition pin badge, especially for Pride Month in June. Show your support for birders across all orientations, creeds and colors, and get your hands on one of only 90 badges available. They are for sale for 55 Rand on our online store, and all of the proceeds will go towards our landscape conservation program. Bookings are open for the 2023 Kruger Bird and Wildlife Challenge, taking place from the 12th to the 19th of February 2023. In partnership with Rock Jumper Birding Tours. Funds raised will go towards our white-winged flufftail conservation project, and you're guaranteed to enjoy a unique approach to birding Kruger National Park on the back of a safari vehicle with world-class guides and birding experts. Visit Rock Jumper Birding's website to book your spot today, and do so soon because spaces are limited. Now, Middelpunt Wetland is the only confirmed breeding site of the critically endangered white-winged flufftail. It is an extensive peat-based wetland on a cattle farm in the process of being declared a private nature reserve. The wetland is facing the threat of cattle trampling the sensitive vegetation layer, such that it cannot be used by waterbirds during the breeding season. To prevent this, BirdLife South Africa would like to design and install 4 kilometers of wildlife-friendly fences that allow wildlife to move through without injury while keeping cattle out. Once installed, the fence design will be evaluated and incorporated into best practice guidelines for national application. Please consider supporting the wildlife-friendly fence by purchasing a 10-meter of fence line for only 500 Rand. Donations, again, can be made via Quicket on the link provided, and it will be also provided in the chat box just now once Nikki gets going. You can stand a chance to win while supporting BirdLife South Africa's important conservation efforts. BirdLife South Africa's annual raffle, Jackpot Birding, is now open and you can win a share of 135,000 Rand. This year there are 3 prizes. First prize is 100,000 Rand, second prize is 25,000 Rand, and third prize is 10,000 Rand. For only 500 Rand a ticket, you have 3 chances to win, and there are only 1,000 tickets available. They are going fast, and I know the 600 on the graphic here is outdated, so you better make sure to purchase yours soon to avoid missing out. You can join BirdLife South Africa for one of the biggest events in African birding this year, the African Bird Fair 2022. This year, we're hosting a hybrid event, meaning the entire program will be available virtually, but you're also welcome to join us in person at our event at our head office, Isdale House, which is in Dunkeld West in Johannesburg. Be sure to diarize the 22nd and the 23rd of July 2022 to enjoy an epic lineup of speakers, exhibitors, and workshops, and the opportunity to connect with other avid birders across the continent and the world. The registration link is coming soon, and more info such as keynote speakers, workshops, etc. is available at birdlife.org.za/African Bird Fair 2022, and a link on screen now. And now on to tonight's main event. Those of you who attended our recent AGM will recognize Nicolette Forbes, one of BirdLife South Africa's new members directors on our board. Nikki is an avid birder based in KwaZulu-Natal and chairs the BirdLife eThekwini KZN Bird Club. She is a coastal scientist with extensive experience working in mangroves, estuaries, and marine habitats, including lots of work recently in KZN with chemical spills and the flooding events. Today, Nikki is continuing our agritourism series focusing on birding in South Africa's major cities and is taking us through her home patch of Durban. Nikki, with that, I'd like to invite you to turn on your video and unmute yourself. And the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Andrew, hello everybody. Thank you very, very much for having me. And you are right, I'm talking about my home patch. I'm a Durban girl, born and bred, and I love it. Tiki and I were debating what kind of word we would use for somebody who loves KZN as much as I do. And we eventually got to KZNophile, and I decided that sounded like I was crazy, which is also quite true. So we'll have to think up of a catchy word for somebody who loves KZN as much as I do. I've traveled many places, but KZN stays very strongly in my heart. So I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know when you can see it. We there?
That looks perfect. Thanks, Nikki.
Okay. I'm going to give you all a slightly different perspective, I hope, of Durban from some that you may have. And I'm going to do that by casting a look back at Durban as it was, and particularly from a birding perspective, and give you some what I hope are interesting facts about Durban, which will help you bird it better when you actually visit. And at the end, I hope I'm going to get everybody to visit. I'm quite gratified to see how many people there are from so many different parts of the world that are online. So I hope I can make you excited and wanting to visit this eastern part of the country. So starting off, just to orientate everybody, as I said, there are people from all over the world that might not have visited KZN before and Durban. Very often people focus on this Western Cape region. Andrew, can you see my pointer if I move it? No. Okay.
Yes, I can.
I got a confirmation from the person in the office next door. So you can see the outline of South Africa that is on this map here. The purplish color indicates KZN, and then we're going to zoom in on this, but this is the area of Durban and the municipal boundary of Durban that you can see there, and it gives you some idea of the scale and the differences of the areas that we're going to be talking about. I won't say any more about the lovely birds on the screen because we're going to have many of them through the evening. So there's the zoom into KwaZulu-Natal, and I've put it out there in full as opposed to the KZN that you can see on the slide, because a lot of people are always unsure about where the capitals go and where the hyphen goes. So you can see the outline of KwaZulu-Natal is almost mirrored by this red outline here of the municipal area. So this is an interesting area, and the whole of KZN really, the little one is just a mirror of that. From a topography and a climate point of view, and the habitats that are created by both those things coming together, we have a wonderful, almost a perfect storm in terms of tropical diversity for our birds. And the Woodwards said it very long ago, and in their lovely book, Natal Birds, KZN is not large, and by KZN we're talking about this whole purple area at the moment. But in the small space that we have here, the bird diversity is superb, and that's a quote from the Woodwards. And to give you a perspective on that, South Africa has over 870 birds. KZN has over 640 on its list, so 75% of the species in the country are found in this pink patch. And I'm just going to flick back and you can see the relative sizes of South Africa to KZN, and that hopefully has impressed you already. If we now start zooming in to eThekwini municipality, and I'm going to give you some of the facts and figures for eThekwini, it really is the main economic driver for the whole province of KwaZulu-Natal. It contributes over 50% of the provincial output with regards to employment and income. And we have the Bay of Natal, and in that the port of Durban, which you can see on the screen there, which is the busiest general cargo port in South Africa, the busiest container port in the Southern Hemisphere. So that is something that has really put Durban on the map in terms of trade and industry. One of the things that people find quite confusing, and you will hear me probably interchangeably use eThekwini versus Durban. The eThekwini municipality is that outline you can see now in green, so the pink outline we had on the previous map, which covers an area of about 2,300 kilometers squared. And that is also known as the Greater Durban area. And I actually had the lady in charge of the environmental division once put me straight in terms of Durban when we were writing a book on Durban's estuaries. And I said, shouldn't we be calling them eThekwini estuaries? And she said, no, we can also use Durban because Durban is the forefront city of the municipality. And eThekwini refers to the municipality. But people do use them interchangeably, and it's been a long cultural name for eThekwini. There's some interesting stories around where the name has come from, but we'll maybe leave that for another day. And just to give you that perspective, so through that area that you can see, which is encompassed in that green outline, Durban is the main city and where the CBD is, but there are a number of other towns that will be familiar to many of you that fall in there, and I've included a selection there. So Amanzimtoti, Cato Ridge, Hillcrest, Mhloti, Umlazi, Inanda, Kwamashu, La Mercy, Umhlanga, New Germany. So all of those areas, which we know as suburbs, there are towns associated with some of them, and they all fall within that eThekwini municipality. So if you see those words referred to on the websites talking about birding, don't let them confuse you. You would still be flying into the city that is Durban if you were coming to visit or driving to Durban. In terms of the biodiversity and the biology, which is where we need to start going when we're talking about the birds, I think it's good for people to realize that we are sitting here very much in a subtropical biogeographic zone. So we've got a very, very tropical climate with hot, humid summers, mild to warm winters. I think we get the best of both worlds. I love both of our seasons. Be they not very different, and you can see the temperature range there, and I'm sure that'll impress some of the more European and possibly American listeners. We only have a range of 16 degrees Celsius to 32 degrees. So those are the average winter and lows and summer highs. And you can see we fall very much in that subtropical zone with the coordinates there between 29 degrees and 30 degrees south. So that really influences the type of diversity we get, along with the topography that I was talking about earlier. And we're going to come back to the topography. But while we're looking at that subtropical biogeographic zone, one of the things that does affect that, and it affects our whole climate here, is that we have a very warm Indian Ocean current roaring down the edge of the coastline and very close to the coastline around eThekwini. And that current is a very warm current, and it influences even more the distribution of animals and plants along the stretch of the coast. So the tropical zone is really extended down here, and we have what is called a southern subtraction zone. So as you go further and further south, you start losing species and diversity, and this is where we really score. We have lots of diversity here and quite a bit of abundance within this coastline. So if we come to more of the terrain, there's the map of the municipality, which you can see clearly there. That terrain map that underlies that, you can see the indication of the rugged topography that we're going to be speaking about. BirdLife eThekwini KZN, Andrew already mentioned that. I'm the chair of that club, and this is our home territory for the club. So although we will bird beyond those boundaries, eThekwini municipality and the Greater Durban area is the area that we try and make a difference within our club and where we explore the most. So this is our kind of local patch. And you will see that the poster down on the left here talks about the Colour Me Green eThekwini, and this was a challenge we started last year, and Dave Rimmer is going to be continuing to pick this up as we move forward, having joined our committee this year. Thank you, Dave. What we try and do is bulk up the data using BirdLife and in the SABAP2 program to improve the data within this green area and in the pentads that fall within it. So that's been a really interesting initiative that, as I said, we started last year, and hopefully we will continue to make a difference and change those pentads. What does it mean in terms of the diversity in this area? We have 400 plus bird species within eThekwini municipality. And I want to remind you again that that is in that area of 2,300 square kilometers. Remembering the KZN list was 640. So we're talking about a much truncated area. But how do we get to that? And one of the ways, I firstly would like to thank Steve McCurrach, and I think he was going to be coming online, and I'm hoping, there's the precious Steve, that he's going to become one of our newest members. But thank you to him for letting me use this very iconic image of Durban to illustrate so elegantly the steepness of our coastline. KZN, particularly in a direct line from Durban inland, has one of the steepest coastlines in the world. In general, we've got an eastern sloping terrain, and there's wide variations in the slope, the temperature, the soil, the aspect, and all of that, for anybody who knows their birds or those of you who are getting into it, all of that is what will express in a great ecological diversity, a range of habitats. So we have things like high altitude hills, open grassland, forests, bushveld, coastal plains with coastal forests, estuaries right coming down to the coast to the marine areas. So that beautiful photograph taken by Steve gives you a view from Durban Bay in the foreground here. So one of our big and major estuaries and the port that we were talking about, right through to the Drakensberg in the background there with snow on the mountains. So you're looking from literally sea level right to the top of our Drakensberg mountains on the escarpment there. So it's just absolutely an amazing view. And I'm going to try and illustrate that a little bit more by showing you, okay, if we look at a line drawn from the Sani Pass, so the High Berg, or High Drakensberg, through to this area here, Durban Bay, which is here at Durban. You can see Durban has got this lovely little sticky out bit. So the Bay of Durban, which is actually offshore, is in that little alcove there, which is where all our surfing beaches and our main swimming beaches are. And if you look at that line and the topography along that, so if we look at an elevation profile, you'll see that from this end of the line through to the bay, you go from 3,000 meters to sea level in the space of about 183 kilometers, it says there. That is one heck of a gradient. If you're talking about the municipality, our municipality ends as you go inland from the coast at about 75 k's here. So you're looking at a change from about 1,500 meters above mean sea level to sea level itself. So you can imagine the altitudinal variation there provides a lot of scope for diversity. And if we look at what that means in the general broad biomes found within that rugged area, you obviously have the coastline. And again, you can see the municipality outlined here, so you get a sense of what we've got within it. You've got the coastline, we've got estuaries along that coastline. So we've got water bodies, we've got dams, wetlands that would cover the water birds. Then we've got savanna, which is indicated here in the slight mauve. This green big belt, the dominant belt, is Indian Ocean coastal belt. And that's a mix which is dominated by coastal forest, but it also has interspersed with it grasslands and dunes. And then savanna, I think I mentioned the savanna, the mauve, as well as the grassland, which is this darker green. Then forest patches, which you can see in pink, dotted about everywhere, but quite constrained and localized to areas where they haven't either been cleared or where they've been allowed to develop unhindered. Obviously, the ruggedness of this area has also helped to secure some of our areas in terms of biodiversity because they haven't been able to develop in some of those areas. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well when you see. I'm going to try and give you just a sense of what those habitats look like in the area of eThekwini and KZN. So obviously the open sea or pelagic, and I see a lot of people had said that they love the pelagics off Durban, and the pelagics off this east coast have become something that is a must-do. Then we've got the coastline with the intertidal zone beaches and dunes, which are going to pave the way for our waders, water birds, shorebirds. Estuaries, which was used in the advert. This is the Mgani estuary, and we have 16 of them within the eThekwini municipal area. We'll come back to that. Some of them have mangroves within them, and there are certain mangrove specialists. And then rivers, obviously cutting through that steep topography. We have a number of rivers and wetlands. So wetland and moist grassland is also one of the habitats. Coastal forest mainly in that Indian Ocean, that green patch that you saw running along the coast, the Indian Ocean coastal belt. Mist belt and scarp forests in various areas towards the inland region. Grasslands, grasslands actually being one of our most endangered habitats along this section of the coast. And then woodland, savanna, and some of our higher altitude areas. I think that was it, yes. So what have all of those habitats meant in terms of the birds? And here I'm going to, if you will indulge me, take a step back and look at what Durban has meant in the past for avian diversity. So Durban itself provided many of the type birds that we know. They were the type specimens of birds that we know today. So these were the birds that were first described. The type specimens are the ones that are kept and housed in museums and were the ones that were used to first describe a species. And I always find it quite fascinating that there are birds that people struggle to see as lifers, and they are real special birds that were found in Durban for the first time. So Clancy, who was the Natal Museum ornithologist, Philip Clancy, described Durban as a one-stop mecca for ornithologists in a document that he wrote. And he related basically the same things that I've been telling you, the wide disparate habitats with terminal tropical elements, so things that were coming down from the tropics that still existed in this area, but then you couldn't be found anywhere else. And he put that as one of the reasons why Durban was so special. And if we look at some of the birds that have been named from Durban first, an African cuckoo hawk, which is on the screen, is one of them, which surprised me. Wahlberg in 1839 to 1845 had a trip to Durban. He lived in Durban for a while in Kongela, for those of you who know the Durban area, and collected a number of different species which were sent back and identified by Sunderval mainly, and included things like African cuckoo hawk, as I said, grey waxbill, scaly-throated honeyguard, swee waxbill, short-tailed pipit from Camperdown. They actually specify the location of short-tailed pipit, African yellow warbler, and then also brown scrub robin, which was collected at the Mgani River, which you've just seen an aerial picture of, near Durban in 1841. So some very, very interesting records. Sorry, I don't know idea why that flicked back. So these are some of the birds: grey waxbill, brown scrub robin, described on the 30th of June in 1841 from the Mgani estuary. Also our red-capped robin chat, one of the ones described from the Durban area. And one of the other surprises, rosy-throated longclaw, was described from Durban in 1845. And if you think of how the range of that bird has retracted back to just an area around the top of Lake St. Lucia, the interesting thing there that the man who collected it was a French Marquis de Tarragon, and he actually named the rosy-throated longclaw after his wife. So the species name is Amélie, and her name was Amélie de Tarragon. The other bird is the one that's on your screen now, the southern banded snake eagle, another bird that was captured on the Berea and was described to science for the first time in Durban, and now located only up in the north. So these are all things that made really Durban a special area. So from there, if we start looking forward, from that amazing history to the present, so the habitats of the past that have yielded some of the special birds that I've just mentioned, some have been inevitably lost because of the development of this large and fast-growing city of Durban. But Durban also acts as quite a major gateway for travel and birding on the East Coast, and includes an international airport that puts you in striking distance of some of the iconic Big Five game reserves, just 2 to 3 hours north of Durban. And these are some of the oldest formally proclaimed game reserves in the country, such as the Shishlui Mfolozi Reserve, the Isimangaliso Wetland World Heritage Site. So being close to some of those areas is part of the attraction of coming through to the East Coast. But before we head away from the city, which has now put in place quite a world-renowned plan in terms of its green spaces and corridor networks, there are many birding places because of that for visitors, which are worth more than one visit in their own right. So that makes Durban a fabulous birding destination itself. Let's have a look at some of the reasons why. Durban is in the Maputaland, Ponderland, Albany biodiversity hotspot, and that is one of only 36 identified global hotspots, and makes whatever remains within Durban and within the municipal area a really important global biodiversity. It's unique and important. The analysis of land cover change that was done in 2011 of what had happened in KwaZulu-Natal between 1994 and 2011, where natural vegetation dropped by 20% from 73 to 53. So you're looking at an average loss of about 1.2% per annum, made the municipal biodiversity staff sit up and take notice. And they really recognized that there was often a lack of capacity and mandate to adequately protect and manage biodiversity, especially outside of formal protected areas, which is obviously where the focus of organizations such as KZNer Wildlife go. So at the local level, they saw there was an opportunity to really make a difference. And they've done this with the system of DMOS. So DMOS, you can see there, stands for the Durban Metropolitan Open Space System. And really its aim is to identify, secure, and manage the important biodiversity within the municipal area. It remains a first for South Africa. And as I said, there is a really global recognition for this concept overseas. Dr. Deborah Roberts, who was really the pioneer of this when she was working in our department. We were both myself and Nicolette Forbes were in the biology department with Deborah when she was writing her PhD up on DMOS. And this plan has really grown in leaps and bounds since she began with the initial DMOS. And there's a dedicated staff that looks to try and secure this biodiversity. And if you have a look here, you'll see why it's hard to pick very favorite birding locations within this municipal area. So what we've got mapped here is all the open spaces that are registered within this open space system. And that includes a whole lot of different types, including the ones I've mentioned earlier, the estuaries, the parks, the gardens, the nature reserves, the formally protected ones, and also includes corridors wherever possible to link these. And you can see some of those starting to stretch out. The other thing they try and do is make sure those corridors actually link regionally as well. So outside the boundaries, they can be local or regional links, really, allowing the ecological processes to operate across those municipal boundaries. So that's the foundation that we can springboard off to see what sort of birds we find within this municipal area. And then we'll talk about where to go to find them. What are probably the top spots you should visit to see some of these. But to give you an idea of that diversity we were talking about, and remembering we were talking over 400 species, I'm not going to keep you here that long, But to give you a sense of the birds and what they look like, particularly for the people who have never seen them before or been here before, 5 species of barbet within the municipal area: black-collared barbet, crested barbet, white-eared barbet, yellow-rumped tinker barbet, and red-fronted, tinkerbird, and red-fronted tinkerbird. Red-fronted not as common or easy to find, but yellow-rumped everywhere. And on the screen is a crested barbet, so it's one of those barbets. Basically, in a many from aloes to other flowering plants. Oh, is my sound gone? Andrew, can you still hear me?
Nikki, we lost you for a few seconds, but you're back now, so I'm not sure what happened.
Okay. Did you hear about the barbets? I don't know which.
Maybe go back one slide and just repeat the sunbirds. We can hear about the barbets.
Okay. Yes, just that there are 7 species of sunbird, and that this relates, I mean, it's a wonderful range of species to get. And in fact, there's 8. There are 8, certainly 8 on Jenny Norman's list, who provided me with her ultimate number, which is 424. She's one of our more experienced birders within the club and has a staggering municipal list. But really the last one, the greater double-collared, is not that easy to find. But these sunbirds are there because we have a whole range of different flowering types of vegetation, from aloes in the inland regions and at the coast to all the flowering shrubs and plants like the one you can see in the back here, which is a tacoma or a honeysuckle. Many of our gardens host some of these sunbirds, and these are 2 that certainly nest in my garden. And this is a pair of collared sunbird. And collared sunbirds, wherever the vegetation is thick and there's a plentiful food for them, you will find them. So it is not difficult to find these birds. If you're looking for sunbirds, look for this tree that you can see here with an olive sunbird on it, an eastern olive sunbird. This is the Hilaria lucida, and I was speaking to some of the group that came out with me to Hawaii on Sunday about this tree. If a Hilaria is flowering, you're sure to see 4 to 5 species of sunbird in it, fighting over the bounty, as well as a few other species. White-bellied sunbirds are very common, so if you're looking for those sorts of species, those sunbirds, you can find 7 really relatively easy within the municipal area. Bee-eaters, we've got 2 bee-eaters with
Sorry, Nikki, we've lost you again. I'm not sure what's going on with the audio.
husband tell me that he's losing me as well, which is throwing me.
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay, back now. Little bee-eaters, in many of the nature reserves and gardens, these are 2 that are actually in my garden as well. That photograph was from there. So again, easy to find. 8 different kingfishers within the municipal area. Giant kingfisher, pied kingfisher, brown-hooded, mangrove. So all of the water kingfishers, as well as the terrestrial hunting species. And lucky enough, because of the mangroves, to have mangrove kingfisher, and there's a pic of one of them. The previous one was brown-hooded kingfisher. So also mangrove kingfisher, which occurs in a couple of places within Durban. 12 swallows and martin species, and you can see them all listed there. And again, in summer, you can get quite a good range very easily in a small area. You don't have to travel to see a lot of these or to get them on a list. 1 or 2 or 3 areas visited. We've had a bird hunt within the club, and in one day are very easily, and this was a quiet day, able to get over 100 species. For an individual pair of people that are competing in that big bird hunt. 3 mannequins, and this has become easier over time. I don't know if that means there's more eyes or more suitable habitat, or somehow the birds are adjusting to more urban areas. It used to be quite hard to seek some of these out, particularly the red-backed manakin and magpie manakin, but all three species of manakin can be seen in some areas of Durban. One of the famous locations, here we go, John and who is it? John Hink and Marion Spence. There we go. Marion is online. I know she is. Jubilee Park is a park that they look after, and magpie manakin can very often be found there. It's one of the locations that's almost a guaranteed. Redback manakin, a bit more difficult, but if you've got highly forested areas, nice deep thick shade, and actually we have all three manakins coming to our garden, particularly in winter. So in the north of Durban, it's become quite easy to find those three manakins all together. They're the magpie manakins actually coming to feeders in winter, and you can see that's quite a big flock of magpies. Very, very special. Get very excited when those arrive. And then the bronze manakins, which are very, very numerous. And if you have a look at pictures of feeders in and around Durban, and in the bottom one, you can actually see a mix of bronze and redback manakin. But bronze manakin can swamp a bird feeder with their numbers, particularly in winter. Then 9 weavers. Again, you can see them listed there. The one in the photograph is the spectacled weaver. That's listed 3rd. But a good selection of weavers can be had. Some of them water associated, like southern brown-throated weaver, yellow and African golden weaver. And there are particular locations. If you're looking for things like southern brown-throated weaver and yellow weaver, the Mhlongo estuary and the Mhlongo river is a good place to look for them. African golden weaver, a little bit more inland, the Kloof area gets them. And there are reserves in the Kloof area where you can find African golden weaver. Not as easy, but it is possible. The others are very common visitors to gardens and areas where they would occur. And some of the other birds that will again be through most of the suburban areas, southern black tit, familiar chats are found throughout the suburbs and the urban areas. Green wood hoopoes. Red-billed and African firefinch are now turning up at a number of different gardens. If you're not seeing some of these birds in your gardens, there needs to be a change in your gardening. And here's another photograph that Steve McCurrach said I could use, one of the hornbills, crowned hornbill. So we get 3 hornbills within the municipal area. Ground hornbill, not so easy, and you're better off a little bit further out of the municipal area into the farming areas of Eston to see things like ground hornbill. Birchall's cuckoos, again, quite easy to see. I think there's a call there, we'll skip over that. Natal spurfowl, both suburban and in the more wild and rural areas of the municipality, and a couple of other spurfowls with them. One of the more unusual visitors we're getting is red-headed finches, and these are also coming to bird feeders in the North Durban area. So if this is something you need for your KZN list, you can get them quite easily. We have a flock of about 30 to 50 birds that is now visiting our feeders. We've seen them feeding babies, so they're now breeding. The idea was that these were escapees, possibly, from an aviary that have managed to take hold. There are other people that think it's some sort of range expansion that's happening, but it's difficult to tell. So we do have red-headed finches now added to the list. We've got 11 doves and pigeons, and you can see there quite a range from the fruit-eating doves to the more bushveld-orientated ones like emerald spotted, forest doves like tambourine dove and lemon dove, and then the ones that you're going to find most often in our gardens, red-eyed dove, laughing dove, and all over basically the streets. If you drive around, you'll be seeing those. Namakwa dove gets a bit more tricky, and there are certain areas where you would be able to pick those up. I know slightly out of Durban, we've seen them at the Sapisango and Bazamba wetland areas, just on the entrance road going through there. We have 7 cuckoos, and you can see again what they are: red-chested, black, Jacobin classes. Emerald, a little bit in the higher areas, more again towards Kloof. We don't really hear them much here at the coast. We do get Deirdrick, and then common cuckoo, the least common of the one on the list for the municipal area, but it's possible. It's not a definite. So if you're looking for cuckoos, the top 6 are going to be relatively easy to come across. And I'm going to end on with the types of birds we get here, with the impressive 33 raptors on the list. I wouldn't have thought this until I looked at the list and started counting, and I obviously haven't listed them all there, but I have listed the ones that you would fairly commonly encounter, which I think in itself says something about the area and the habitat that is being provided within this area. So crowned eagle and martial eagle being the 2 bigger beasts in amongst that lot. The migrant yellow-billed kites, which will be coming back soon, hopefully. Wahlberg's eagle and booted eagle, also in summer, are starting to come over our suburbs a lot more often. And again, whether this is eyes or whether there is better habitat developing in some of these areas that's attracting them is difficult to say. Long-crested eagle, often along the roadsides, particularly here in the north of Durban, and if you go south of Durban. Brown snake eagle occasionally, and black-chested snake eagle we've certainly seen flying over. Palm-nut vultures and African fish eagles, and the 2 sparrowhawks are very easy to spot within the municipal areas if you know where they hang out. We actually had a little sparrowhawk kill in our garden this morning. He took out a house sparrow, so at least he took one of the aliens. But it's an incredibly devastating little hunter, and that's her sitting, or him, sitting there looking at us in the photographs that you can see there. And then African harrier hawk, which some of you might remember was a gymnogene, and lanner falcons and peregrine falcons are fairly easy to get a look at within this municipal space. So if we start looking for where you would look for some of those groups of birds within eThekwini, as I've mentioned, we have 16 estuaries in the Greater Durban area, and if you visit any of those, you are likely to pick up water birds. Any of the dams in the more outlying areas away from some of the really heavy city developments will host some water birds, and we've taken to stopping and going out into the more rural areas to start this atlasing drive that we've been doing. And what is interesting is you don't have to be in one of our more formal reserves or parks, obviously, to find birds, and it's becoming clearer that we need to start exploring a lot more of those areas and start documenting what is there. But if we look at the formal places where you can go and look for water birds within eThekwini municipality, Shongweni Resources Reserve is an all-time favorite for a lot of people and has an amazing mix of birds. You'll see it coming up on a lot of other lists. The Umbilo Ponds also host things like black-crowned night heron, which you don't often find within the municipal area, and you can get lovely photo views of it there, and we've done so on some of our BirdLife eThekwini KZN outings. Inanda Dam, Kwashimba Conservancy has a lovely river, and there has been African finfoot seen on the Mgani River, which runs through there. And then the Durban Botanic Gardens can give you some close-up views, and you'll see some photographs just now. If we talk about further afield, because we tend to think of some of these areas as falling within our Durban space, and that is the Sapistanga Ombazamba wetlands would be recommended for water birds. If you are going to travel a little bit further, it's very easily within striking distance of Durban. It's only 60 k's north and closer to the airport if you're coming in from the airport and traveling north. So that would be one of the recommended locations that would be further afield. But otherwise, probably these 5, and then just exploring the hinterland, the inland outer west regions in terms of any wetlands or dams that there might be. Even in between some of the sugarcane, north and south of Durban, any of the water bodies there generally will host a lot of the water birds. If we talk bushveld and grassland birds, you'll see Shongweni comes up yet again. Shongweni Resources Reserve, which sits around the Shongweni Dam, has a number of different components and habitats to it. So you get a wonderful mix. If you're looking for a good bird list on an outing, I would certainly recommend Shongweni Resources Reserve for that. New Germany Nature Reserve, Steenbank Nature Reserve, all of these are within 20 minutes of the center of Durban. You're looking at a very easy drive and access to these. Most of them are either formally protected through the Protected Areas Act with KZN Wildlife, or they are formal parks and reserves with the municipal authority. The outer west suburbs I've already mentioned. As I've said, this has become quite an important area to bird, and we are finding things that we didn't know would be out there in our atlasing adventures to those places. Dave Rimmer's been doing a lot of exploring out that way and has come up with a few nice sightings of things, including Shelley's Franklins and Malachite's sunbirds. Springside Nature Reserve is another favorite for bushveld and grassland, and has things like fan-tailed warbler. What is its new name? I can't remember at the moment. And then further afield, going south of Durban, Vernon Crook's Nature Reserve is a wonderful bushveld and grassland bird venue, and really has also water and forest. So it has a whole range of things. We'll come back to Vernon Crook's just now. Then forest and coastal birds, again, Shongweni Resources Reserve pops up. Palmeat Nature Reserve, very good for forest birds, and half-collared kingfisher, if you're looking for half-collared kingfisher, it turns up there. Pigeon Valley Nature Reserve, a fantastic little reserve. A lot of people had said in the chat that that's one of their favorites. It's interesting, it came up very high from the members as well when I did a survey. Umhlanga Lagoon Nature Reserve is going to have deep, deep coastal forest. It also has an estuary, so you're going to also be able to get water birds from there and shore birds because there's beach access. Unfortunately, is closed at the moment, still from the UPL chemical spill. Kranzkloof Nature Reserve, a little bit inland at Kloof. Here you've got a very big, deep gorge, very thick forest, lovely trails, and lots of different things like crowned eagle, which you can see in the photograph there. Mountain wagtails, very good in very good locations in Kloof to get mountain wagtail. Both Kranzkloof and Palmeat have, as well as Steinbach Nature Reserve. And then Springside again for forest. Springside is one of the only places I've heard both flufftails, buff-spotted and red-chested, calling within half an hour of each other. On one walk, so it's also an incredible reserve. So I asked our members, I must say, I got a very limited response, unfortunately, but you'll see that the club members' favorites coincide a little bit with some of the things that have come up on the chat, which is quite interesting. But Pigeon Valley Nature Reserve certainly won the day with the votes, and I think that's for its proximity, the ease of getting around it, and the wonderful things that it provides, like spotted ground thrush. So now in winter, if you visit Pigeon Valley, spotted ground thrush is there, and Crispin Hempson has been reporting on seeing more than one individual at the reserve, and they seem to have really got quite used to people walking through. So they're providing lovely photographic opportunities. Shongweni is favorite number 2. I think that this would have actually been number 1, but I think a lot of our newer members haven't experienced Shongweni in the same way as it used to be experienced by the older members. We haven't visited it quite as much, and that's because there's now such a range of different venues that we don't go there quite as often as we used to. I know there are some members that spend every big birding day there. Ngani Estuary and Beechwood Mangroves in combination got the 3rd spot, and then Palmeat and Umhlanga Lagoon, some of these I've mentioned, Kranzkloof and Springside. So those are the top 7 areas. And really the birds that I've run through in terms of the groups you can see within the eThekwini municipality, a visit to any one of these or a combination of these will get you a really good list of 100 to 150 if you work hard over a day. And it's a good day of birding. This gives you some idea of what some of these areas look like. This is the Durban Botanic Gardens, and you can see what lovely members we have. They hug trees. That's one of our long-standing club members doing her thing for nature. And you can get close up to water birds in Durban Botanic Gardens. So they provide lovely opportunities to get to know birds in an area where you can walk around certainly on your own, because there's always lots of people utilizing the space, and you can bird in relative safety, and also just see the same sorts of common birds over and over again to practice. A number of our different estates and golf courses also provide very good opportunities with a whole range of habitats, from forest to wetland to dams and open grassy lawns. So a number of our bird club walks go to some of these areas where we have members that can provide access. This gives you some idea of what Vernon Crooks looks like. It was one of the outlying areas that I mentioned. That was where you can see brown scrub robin, relatively easy. They also have a bit of game in that park, and fantastic fantastic springtime flowering bulbs and flowers. So September's a really good time, September, October, a good time to visit there. And you can see one of our members getting really down and dirty with things and looking at everything. So we tend to look at more than just the birds. This is a shot of Sapistanga Mbazamba wetlands, which I think speaks for itself. That was on a particularly good pelican day, but there's a range of birds that you can find there. It's a good spot in the summer for lesamoyhen. We've had up to 7 or 9 birds there at a time on the wetlands. So Sapistanga, I would say, is definitely a must for those wanting to. There's a nice hide there, which they're busy upgrading again now. It was vandalized, but there are 2 platforms that you can bird from and a hide. And it's certainly a wonderful day of both birding and photography for those of you interested in both. And I'd like to end with, oh, sorry, there's a typo there, but that is Springside Nature Reserve again, coming back more local, closer. Springside is in Kloof in eThekwini. And we lost this week one of our members actually on the weekend, Derek Spencer. He was one of our honorary life members of the club. He particularly loved Springside and been giving Springside a lot of time over the last 10 years. That photograph is actually from an article in one of the newspapers that was done of Derek because of his work at Springside. He was an incredible birder, did a lot for the club, mentored a lot of our members and took many, many people for walks and turned them over to birding. So I just wanted to end that with a bit of a tribute to Derek. And I'm sure many of you are fairly tired now after all that. I'm very happy to take questions. So thank you for listening, and visit us in Durban soon.
Thank you so much, Nikki. That was wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. There's a wealth of information for people to use on their next trip to Durban, and I sincerely hope that people will use that information. Of course, this is being recorded and will be up on YouTube tomorrow. So if anyone missed any of the slides or missed a note when they were sitting there curiously writing on their exam pads, you can go back and watch the recording. So thank you so much, Nikki. Your local knowledge is exceptional, and we really appreciate you spending your time with us and putting so much effort into your presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. If I could just say that I've put a website address. I thought I had. Did it go through? There's lots of things. Yes, it's there, which is for our club, but it has news and trip reports on it. So if you look under the news and trip reports section, it details trip reports from all our walks, and it gives people, it's always with photographs and with the bird scene and a bird list. It might help people to also prepare if they want to visit one of those areas, to use that resource, but also to watch our calendar, our activities calendar, because although we have those walks free for members, visitors are always welcome with a donation for the birds. And if you happen to be coming to Durban, look at our calendar. If you want to join one of those walks, it's very easy to book. Jenny Norman, our activities coordinator, will sort out any visitors and tell them how to go about it.
Thank you so much. That's a great resource. And I'll add to that and say that when you leave this webinar, you should be automatically directed to our Go Birding site as well. And there's a lot of, I think all of those sites that you mentioned there are on our Go Birding site as well. So I know that Nikki and the BirdLife eThekwini Club had a lot of input into that. So thank you to those who contributed. And if you are looking for more information, contact details, etc., that's also a good resource. So between those 2 sites and this webinar, you've got no excuses. Go get out there and enjoy Durban and eThekwini municipality. Before we get on to questions, just a reminder that next week we have a webinar by Dr. Robert Thompson. He's based at the Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology down at UCT, and he's going to be talking about the incredible sociable weavers, and not only the weavers themselves, but also how they, through their incredible nest building, facilitate an entire ecosystem for other animals. So I'm very much looking forward to that one. He was also my master's supervisor, so another little link there to the BirdLife South Africa team. Although I was working on water birds, so it's not the most far removed thing from Kalahari distance as you can get. Okay, we're going to kick off with some of those questions if you're ready, Nikki. And I think I'm going to kick off with one which is quite topical at the moment from Penny Abbott. And Penny would like to know what effect the floods in KZN have had on birding in the area and the birds themselves.
That's a really good question and an interesting question, because I've spent my time, because we've been obviously looking at the UPL chemical spill and sampling and helping with some of the emergencies around the floods. For instance, the Sapref refinery, which people will know because the Durban airport used to be right there, the old Durban airport. Sapref refinery went under about 3 meters of water. So what we've seen is an incredible lot of damage to infrastructure and roads and bridges and various other things. But the natural systems, this is part and parcel. And I can speak certainly to the estuaries and the rivers, because we've gone and looked at some of them. In areas where the floods have come through, I can only tell you that those areas look beautiful. The top of the Umhlanga and the upper Umhloti River looks absolutely amazing. I have never in my career actually seen them look like that. I started my real research work just after the 1987 floods, which a lot of old Durbanites will remember. And so I wouldn't have seen what things looked like after that. But seeing the rivers now, it's absolutely amazing. Even the beaches where there were big waves along with some of those floods, they've just handled it. That's what adaptation and having natural systems is all about, because it's part of the life cycle of some of these systems. They get cleared out, they get deepened. That's what floods do. So the birding since the floods has been absolutely amazing. And in fact, it didn't even worry the European oystercatcher, the Eurasian oystercatcher, which has been on Umhlanga Beach since December. We actually spotted it during our sampling. And I thought that that might flush it might go after that, but it's still hanging around. So I would say that in terms of the birds, there is a certain amount of impact, and because it's later, it didn't affect the breeding, but a lot of the reeds have been taken out of the rivers, which is obviously where the birds would have been, some of the weavers and things like that would have been breeding. And those will bounce back. They're already regrowing. We've seen a lot of regrowth, even since the May floods. And so it's a good thing. It's a very positive thing for natural systems, those sorts of floods.
Well, that's a lovely silver lining on all the tragic news we've been hearing about the floods and the human impacts. But
the human impacts are terrible.
Absolutely. But I can't wait for summer to see what those revitalized systems are going to bring.
Very exciting.
I'm going to have to plan some work trips down to Durban, I think, and also to come spend some time in your garden. So half of those birds you were saying would come into your garden, so I think I'm going to come visit for some tea, if that's okay.
Absolutely, you're most welcome.
There's 3 questions already that I can see that all relate to safety. One of them specifically to Shongweni Resources Reserve, and the others just more generally to the municipal area and what people should be aware of and what precautions should be taken. If you can comment. Okay.
Yeah, it's always difficult to comment on security, as you know. Shongweni's been through a little bit of upheaval and rough ride. It's been handed over to the community, and the community are trying to get it up and running. And there has been somebody helping to guide that. I'm not sure if he is still there. I know people have visited, and maybe some of the members that are online that are in the chat group can post a comment there, but I think people have visited fairly recently, and the birding there is just so excellent, and I have not heard of any safety issues. You run a little bit of a gauntlet going into the reserve, but that, you know, that depends on the person and the tolerance for areas that are not necessarily formal and very easy to get through. But it's such an amazing place. I would recommend that people go in a bit of a group, a small group, rather than individually. But yeah, it's well worth visiting.
Great, thank you for that. There's a question that's just come through from Sarah Charlton, asking if you could talk to some of the community initiatives, areas where bird communities are contributing to and being recognized for birding interactions. Are there any community bird guides, for instance, in the area? And just thank you for a wonderful presentation as well.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, there are a couple of initiatives, and we obviously have the community bird guides that move through this area. Most of them are located slightly north of us, but they do definitely come into the Durban area to some of the better places for getting some of the specials, like Pigeon Valley for spotted ground thrush. They come to Durban Bay for waders and for the migrant waders. So we have the BirdLife South Africa guides, trained guides, that definitely utilize the area, and a number of our different bird groups support them by using them to host walks and things like that. The Shongweni Resources Reserve is one of the community initiatives that I know has tried to get off the ground. I'm not quite sure of the success of that as yet. I also know that there's a guide that WESA, I think it's WESA, have been trying to develop in the Umhlanga Lagoon Nature Reserve area. So there's a number of different little initiatives. There's also some areas that are being developed, like the Birchall's Kukul Eco Trail, which I didn't mention, on the Ilovo estuary. And that has some guides associated with it as well. So yeah, there's quite a lot. Quite low key happening at the moment. There's no formal framework around that. I think associated with one of the dumps as well, eThekwini municipality has got some bird monitors actually monitoring long-term data around the rehabilitation in some of those areas.
Great, thank you for that. Quick one, which I'm going to just answer, from Joseph, asking if this presentation can be shared. Well, Joseph, as I said at the start, these are all recorded. So if you just go to YouTube and head over to BirdLife South Africa, or search BirdLife South Africa on YouTube, you'll find all of our webinars, which I think this is the 97th episode of Conservation Conversations. So 100 coming up very, very soon. So you can access all of those presentations on our YouTube channel. George Ledeck has another sort of development-related question, and he'd like to know, how much has the King Shark Airport affected specifically the large barn swallow roosts in that area?
Well, the last time we went out there, which was this last summer, myself and Tiki, who George knows, hello George, we saw an incredible number of swallows. In fact, so much so that I videoed it, came back and shared the video with the club and said, if people haven't been out to see the swallows, have a look. So I was quite relieved to see that, because we did go through what seemed to be a bit of a slump in the swallows. There was some, this is more anecdotal than really scientific, there was one point at which they disappeared from that Mount Moreland wetland completely. And this was probably 2 or 3 years ago. And at that stage, people put forward the idea that what had happened was that they'd been spraying with pesticides of that wetland to get rid of the insects, to get rid of the mosquitoes. And that obviously might have driven away, if it did happen, might have driven away the swallows. But they had certainly moved from that one and the Froggy Pond wetland, which is just around the corner. But I was very relieved this last summer to see an incredible number of swallows there. I mean, it really was probably more than I've ever seen there. So yeah, I would say it looks like it's hanging in there. And after they moved the airport, this is just an interesting bit which George may or may not know, but the old Durban airport, where planes were moving and taking off all the time, was found to have had a swallow roost actually just on the eastern side, on the seaside of the runway. So I'm hoping that despite the projections that many swallows would have got sucked into engines and that they would disappear with the noise, that the way in which it's being managed seems to be working. And I'm hoping that the monitoring is still going on there.
Great. Okay, I had no idea there was such an important swallow presence down that side.
We're talking 3 to 5 million swallows. I mean, it's big.
Wow. Okay, I'd love to see that video at some point.
Or come through in summer. Come through when the summer's on again, and you can have that coffee, and we'll take you to see the swallows.
Yeah, there's a comment from Rosemary I noticed in the chat saying, with all the people who want to visit your garden, you'll have to put up a turnstile and tea stall.
A BirdLife South Africa gazebo, please.
There we go. There we go. On the subject of swallows and migrants, there was a question from Shashi wanting to just know a little bit more about any of the migrant species that regularly can be found in the Durban area, which you look out for.
There's lots. Yeah, I mean, there are lots. The yellow-billed kites very obviously come in their numbers. The swallows, the barn swallows, they're a non-breeding migrant. They come here basically to feed. So that barn swallow roost at Mount Moreland is only active in the summer when they come across from the northern hemisphere. And then we have many of the migratory waders, the Palearctic migrants coming across and utilizing our estuaries, mainly Durban Bay, Mgani. Those are the major wader areas for feeding and stepping stones, I suppose. We don't get quite the numbers of the Palearctic migrants that you get, waders that you get down in the Western Cape, but we still do have some interesting wanderers coming through. And then there'll be the cuckoos. So there's a number of different species that come through, some of the raptors. And yeah, that's what contributes to that long list of over 400.
Wonderful. And then there's one last question, unless I see some late ones come in. Another one from George, and he's asking a very specific question around what I assume is a bogey bird. And he's saying, is anywhere near Durban that he could see Shelley's Franklin?
George, you need to come back. We'll find your Shelley's. We certainly found them in the Outer West area and heard them calling out there. Somebody else also said to me the other day, if you need Shelley's, you know, come to our venue. I can't remember what it was. Can you remember where it was? No, Nambiti is definitely one of the areas, but that's outside of the municipal area. There's actually I'll look it up again, George, because I wrote it down, but there is one almost guaranteed area of Shelley's Franklin within the municipality. So George, you have to come back and stay.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that's it from the audience. I don't see any more questions. So all that's left to say is thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight. And thank you again to Nikki for a wonderful presentation. I'm certainly going to be watching it back the next time I have a trip planned to Durban, and I'll come say hi. And yeah, thank you for sharing with us tonight.
Well, thank you. And thank you everybody for listening.